On the 1st of July, 2025, a man walked a tangle of oak and scrubby willow in West Sussex, notebook in hand, counting flashes of purple in the canopy. He counted 148, then more. He kept going. He stopped at 283, a British record for a butterfly most people never see. 45 miles away, London went to work. And 25 years earlier, this exact ground was maize and barley, its owners £1.5 million in debt, their neighbours mailing furious letters calling it an eyesore of weeds. How did letting land go so wrong go this right? The man with the notebook is Neil Hume, and counting purple emperors is close to a religion for him. The purple emperor is Britain's second largest butterfly, a bruise-coloured, iridescent thing that spends most of its life in the treetops and almost never comes down where you can see it. Enthusiasts call the male His Imperial Majesty and travel for hours just to glimpse one. Getting 283 in a single day is not birdwatching. It is closer to witnessing a miracle you were told had ended. But the butterflies weren't the strange part. The strange part was where they were. Because the purple emperor is not supposed to live here. For most of the last century, if you asked a British naturalist where to find one, they would send you into ancient woodland. Deep, old cathedral forest. The emperor was a woodland aristocrat, rare, fussy, fading, and the way you protected it was by protecting old trees. That was the textbook. That was the plan. Knepp is not ancient woodland. Knepp, 25 years ago, was a bankrupt farm. So how did a failing farm end up with the largest colony of a woodland butterfly in the entire country? To answer that, you have to go back to the mud. The clay at Knepp is the villain of the first act. 300 meters of heavy low-wheeled clay sitting on limestone, ground that a local once described as concrete in summer and unfathomable porridge the rest of the year. In a wet winter, it swallows tractors. In a dry summer, it cracks like pottery. You cannot easily farm concrete and porridge. Charlie Burrell tried anyway. Burrell inherited the 3,500-acre estate from his grandparents in the late 1980s. He had trained at agricultural college. He fully expected to be a farmer, like the family before him, and for 17 years he threw everything at it: dairy herds, arable crops, bigger machinery, modern methods, ice cream, yogurt, sheep's milk, anything that might turn a profit on ground that refused to cooperate. Every year, the better-soiled industrial farms elsewhere undercut him. Every year, the overdraft climbed. In 17 years, the farm made a cash surplus twice. By the end of the 1990s, the Burrells were about £1.5 million in debt. That's the number that starts this whole story. Not a butterfly count, a debt. In February 2000, they gave up the fight. They sold the dairy herds, they sold the machinery, they cleared the debt and stood on a farm that had nearly ruined them, with no idea what to do with it. Here's the reversal that changed everything, and it's smaller than you'd expect. They stopped trying to make the land produce and started asking what the land wanted to do on its own. That idea didn't come from nowhere. Around that same time, a book by a Dutch ecologist named Frans Vera was translated into English. Vera argued something close to heresy: that the natural landscape of Europe was never wall-to-wall closed forest. It was messier than that, a shifting mosaic of grassland, thorny scrub, and scattered trees, churned and opened and fertilized by big roaming herbivores. Grazers and browsers weren't guests in the system. They were the engine that kept it alive. Burrell and Tree went to the Netherlands, to a place called Oostvaardersplassen, and saw what Vera meant. Then they came home and did something their neighbors found close to insane. They let the animals loose, not the exact ancient beasts, those are extinct, proxies, Old English longhorn cattle standing in for the wild ox, Exmoor ponies for the wild horse, Tamworth pigs rooting the soil like wild boar, red, fallow, and roe deer. No fixed fields, no fertilizer, no plow. Just animals moving across the land, eating what they wanted, knocking things over, and a couple deciding, for the first time in the estate's history, to get out of the way. And here's what nobody warned them about. For the first few years, letting go doesn't look like recovery. It looks like ruin. When you stop farming land, it does not politely turn into a wildflower meadow. Young rewilding landscapes go through an ugly adolescence, a violent burst of annual and biennial weeds that colonize bare, disturbed ground first. At Knepp, that meant ragwort. Then thistle. Great yellow drifts of common ragwort, and at its worst, 60 acres of creeping thistle. To the neighbours, this was the proof they'd been waiting for. The letters came in. Isabella Tree later described the slew of them, yours sincerely disgusted, accusing the couple of an immoral waste of land, an affront to the countryside, of turning their home into an eyesore of noxious weeds and brambles. And ragwort isn't only an aesthetic complaint, it's named as an injurious weed under a law from 1959. It's toxic to horses. The fear that it would spread onto working farms was real, it was legal, and it had teeth. This is the moment the whole project nearly died. Not from ecology, from humiliation. Because if you're the couple everyone already thinks has lost their minds, and your land erupts into the exact weeds your neighbors warned you about, you have two options. Reach for the sprayer and the mower and kill the process before it even starts. Or hold your nerve and look insane. They mostly held their nerve. They cut 50-meter strips around the boundaries to stop the weeds spreading onto neighboring land, a compromise, a peace offering. And in the middle, they sat on their hands. Then something arrived that no plan had promised. On a warm Sunday morning in May 2009, Tree woke to butterflies streaming past her bedroom window. Painted ladies, migratory butterflies coming up from the continent, were passing at a rate of about 1 a minute. It was one of the great mass migrations that species performs, and it landed on Knepp at exactly the right moment. Because the painted ladies' caterpillars have a favorite food: thistle. By autumn, the caterpillars had eaten their way through the thistle fields, pupated, and flown off. The following year, the 60 acres of creeping thistle had simply vanished. Nobody sprayed it, nobody mowed it. The problem the neighbors were certain would destroy Knepp was solved by an insect that showed up uninvited and ate it. That was the moment the mess stopped being a problem and started being an engine. Because here's what the ragwort and the thistle actually were. They weren't the failure. They were the first stage of the recovery, working exactly as it's supposed to. Bare ground grows weeds. Weeds stabilize and shade the soil. Then the thorny scrub moves in: blackthorn, hawthorn, dog rose, bramble, and crucially, sallow. Pussy willow. And the scrub is where the story turns. But wait, if you just walk away from a field, won't it eventually turn into solid woodland and shade all that scrub back out? That's exactly the trap, and it's why doing nothing wouldn't have worked either. This is where the animals do their real job. The pigs root up patches of bare earth where new seeds can land. The cattle and ponies browse the growing scrub, nibbling it back, breaking it open, keeping it from ever locking into a closed, shady canopy. What they create is not a field and not a forest. It's the endlessly patchy, in-between, sunlit thickets, thorny islands, open ground, standing old trees, held in that state by thousands of hungry mouths. Vera's mosaic, alive and self-maintaining. Wouldn't free-roaming animals just eat everything down to bare dirt, the way overgrazing wrecks land everywhere else? That's the fear, and the answer is in the numbers of them. Knepp keeps its animals at low densities and lets them wander, so they never graze a place to a uniform lawn. Some spots get hammered. Others escape, protected by thorns, and a young oak or sallow shoots up inside a bramble bush where no mouth can reach it. The unevenness is not a flaw. The unevenness is the entire point. Now back to our butterfly. Remember the textbook? Purple emperor, woodland species, needs ancient forest. Here's what the textbook got backwards. The emperor doesn't lay its eggs on ancient oaks. It lays them on sallow, scrubby, unglamorous willow, the kind of plant that colonizes neglected ground. The caterpillars grow up on sallow leaves. What the adults want is the oak, but not for nesting, for feeding. Emperors are strange butterflies with decadent, almost grotesque tastes. They don't sip flowers. They drink sap oozing from wounds in oak bark, and they come down to the ground to feed on dung and fox droppings, behaving more like a tropical insect than a delicate English one. So the emperor doesn't need a cathedral forest. It needs a specific messy combination. Young sunlit sallow scrub for the caterpillars, mature oaks for the adults, and open ground in between. A mosaic. The exact thing that clean forestry, tidy woodland management, and intensive farming had spent a century erasing. We didn't lose the emperor because we lost old trees. We lost it because we tidied away the scruffy in between. And this is the deeper trick of the whole story, the thing that should make you look at the countryside differently. The neat, green, mowed English landscape that everybody pictures as natural, it's the damaged version. It's a stripped-down machine with half its moving parts removed. The older people around Knepp remembered when fields full of yellow ragwort were just normal. They'd grown up with it. Their grandchildren had grown up thinking bare, weed-free pasture was what nature looked like. The problem was never only that wildlife declined. The problem was that we forgot what a working landscape even looks like, so when one started coming back, it looked to everyone like a mess. But could scrub really rebuild an ecosystem? Wasn't Knepp just getting lucky? Here's where the numbers stop looking small. The scrub spread. Between 2001 and 2019, researchers from Queen Mary University of London measured roughly 96 hectares of new scrub habitat forming across the estate, well over 1 million square meters of the exact eyesore the neighbours had complained about. And the emperors followed. In 2010, the count of purple emperors at Knepp was 0. None. In June 2017, on a single day, surveyors counted 148, a UK record. And on the 1st of July 2025, Neil Hume counted 283, breaking the record again. Knepp now holds one of the largest colonies of purple emperors in Britain, but the butterfly is just the headline. Underneath it, the whole system woke up. Turtle doves, a bird that has crashed by around 98% nationally since the mid-1990s, genuinely sliding toward being lost from Britain, started singing at Knepp. In 2008, there were 2 singing males. By 2024, there were 22. Nightingales, another bird in steep national decline, moved into the thorny scrub and started singing again. Dragonflies and damselflies increased by 871% between 2005 and 2025. 13 of Britain's bat species turned up. All 5 native owl species. A rare wood-boring weevil that had not been recorded in the area for 50 years reappeared in the dead and rotting timber. The tidy old estate would never have left standing. And it went all the way down into the dirt. The soil that had been compacted and drained by decades of plowing started breathing again. Earthworms, fungi, the invisible machinery of a living landscape returning beneath the scrub. Visitors today say the first thing that hits them isn't a rare bird at all. It's the sound, a low, surround sound thrumming of insects, the kind of background roar that most of the modern countryside has gone quiet without anyone noticing. When a 2-decade review of the project was published, the pattern was undeniable. Survey teams weren't just recording gentle improvement, they were finding species in places that had held nothing for years. "It's astonished everybody," Tree told CNN. "It has been an extraordinary story of hope." Now the skeptic's question, because you should be asking it, isn't 283 just a fluke of good weather? Partly, honestly, yes, and this is where the story earns its trust. 2025 was a hot, sunny summer across England, and butterflies boomed nationally. Hume said it plainly, clouds of butterflies everywhere, and that none of them wanted the summer to end. Warm weather lifted numbers everywhere that year. So the record isn't purely Knepp's doing. But here's the thing the weather can't explain. You cannot get 283 purple emperors on a hot day in a place that has no sallow scrub for them to breed in. Weather fills the tank. Habitat builds the engine. The sunshine gave every colony in England a good year, and Knepp had by then built the biggest engine in the country out of land it got by doing less. That's the difference between luck and leverage. And there's a second question worth asking. If nature is this powerful, why did it need the animals at all? Why couldn't the abandoned farm just heal on its own? Because the disturbance had been missing for so long. Take the plow away and leave the land completely alone, and you don't get the mosaic. You drift, slowly, toward closed, shady woodland, and the sun-loving scrub the Emperor depends on never gets its window. The land didn't need to be left alone. It needed its missing workers put back. The big herbivores were the part of the machine that had been fired. And the idea didn't stay behind Knepp's fences. The neighbors who once sent disgusted letters, many of them are now in the same room. Around 43 farmers in the area have joined a farm cluster group that Knepp belongs to, sitting down together to ask what land is actually for. Burrell went on to co-found a company, Nattergal, that buys degraded land specifically to rewild it. Knepp stopped being a lunatic's private hobby and became a template studied by conservationists around the world, with visitors arriving to camp among the scrub the neighbors had wanted sprayed. Think about what that reversal actually cost. For a quarter of a century, this couple absorbed the letters, the sneering, the quiet certainty of everyone around them that they had thrown away good land and a good name. There was no guarantee any of it would work. For most of those years, there was no butterfly record to point to, no film crew, no book on the bestseller list, just weeds, debt, and a growing pile of disgusted correspondence. The vindication came late, and it came in the form of a landscape that finally, undeniably, spoke for itself. Then the story got stranger. In 2020, white storks hatched chicks at Knepp, the first white storks known to breed in the wild in Britain in around 600 years. 600 years. Big, prehistoric-looking birds nesting in the oaks of a former Sussex dairy farm in a country that had forgotten they ever belonged here. And there was a quieter twist underneath it. Beavers were brought back to the estate, and they did what beavers do. They built dams, and the dams made ponds, and the ponds pulled in still more life. Tree has pointed to those beaver-made wetlands as part of why the turtle doves came back at all. The mess didn't just restore one rare butterfly. It rebuilt a food web layer by layer, each returning species making room for the next. Now the honest part. Because a story that admits nothing shouldn't be trusted. This was not magic, and it is not a formula you can stamp onto any field. Knepp had 3,500 acres, enough room for a whole mosaic to form and shift. It had owners with the capital and the sheer stubbornness to survive years of looking foolish and losing money. The system isn't truly hands-off. The grazing animals are fenced within the estate, and their numbers are controlled by culling, because there are no wolves left to do it. Even the ragwort piece required those boundary strips. And Knepp's success is fragile in a new way. There have been plans for thousands of houses nearby that campaigners fear would cut the estate off, leaving it a wildlife island in a sea of development. So no, you can't rewild every farm, and letting land go wild in the wrong place, at the wrong scale, without the right animals, won't conjure purple emperors out of thin air. The solution worked because it hit the right bottleneck. It put big herbivores back onto ground that had lost its disturbance, and then it stopped interfering long enough for the scrub to grow. That's the whole trick, not force. Leverage. For 25 years, people called Isabella Tree and Charlie Burrell crazy. Not because they were wrong about the science, they turned out to be righter than the textbooks. They were called crazy because they did the one thing a good farmer, a good landowner, a tidy Englishman is never supposed to do. They stopped fighting the land. They didn't build the butterfly a forest. They didn't drop a single pond into place with a machine. They put back the animals, they cut a few peacekeeping strips at the edges, and then they got out of the way and let a bankrupt farm remember what it used to be. And on a warm July morning, 25 years later, a man stood in the scruffy willow they were once mocked for allowing and counted 283 emperors ruling ground that everyone else had written off as ruined. The land was never dead. It was just waiting for someone to stop tidying it.